a few things I want to address today. Oh. Rachel Rose recommended this channel called Arcturus RA, and she directed me to this video about, he was drawing analogies about Westworld. And I've done the same thing. I mean, that's every single movie out there is containing bits and pieces that help remind us what's going on. And we don't really need any more reminders, not really. After a while, the Matrix style, Westworld, Groundhog Day, Avatar, every movie that has any sustenance in it, we don't need any more of those. We're slow anyway. How many do we need? I've not been saying anything new this whole time. I've just been rehashing the same thing. Some more people are drawn to it, but as far as the general overall dynamic goes, it's the same thing. Aside from the individuals that are changing within it. The few and far between individuals that are changing within it. Once you see it once you see the realm or whatever for the Matrix imprisonment, it's all the same thing. It's nothing new. And my message has always been the same, and that is that you ought to be being innovative. Watch yourself and not watch yourself and see what you're doing that's robotic and change that. You don't need to give energy to the people that are being robots. And as well, you don't need to give energy to the parts of yourself that are being robotic. See them for what they are and let them change. They'll change once you see them. Because if you have aspects of your life that are robotic and you don't change them or you don't see them, they will continue and you'll be unconscious in those particular portions of your life. You won't be there. You're only there when you're not being robotic. When you're creating every moment, that's when you're there. Otherwise, you're receded, or you're gone, or you're dreaming. You're awake dreaming. And it's easy to slip in and out of it. Very easy. And there are very few people or entities or beings on YouTube or anywhere that aren't either agendizing themselves, or simply looking for something that makes them feel good, or popularity, or views. Whatever it is, these lower aspects of our being, there aren't very many of them out there that are not doing that. So I appreciate it whenever I find someone who's not doing that. Like Mr. Arcturus RA. He doesn't appear to be doing that, so I appreciate him for that. Because whenever somebody is not doing that, it demonstrates that they've gone through all of the pain and suffering and mind games to the extent necessary to realize that that stuff, the ego stuff, is a huge part of the loop. And the loop is just repeating unconscious patterns. Call it programming, call it whatever you want. That's what the loop is. And that's the fallback. That's what we fall back to when we don't confront things. And when we allow any sort of fear mechanism to move through us without confronting it, without looking at it, without acknowledging it. That's what sends us directly back into the unconscious loop. And all it requires to get past that particular thing, whatever it is looking at it. Talk it out with yourself, talk it out with someone else who you trust. Just don't ignore it. Don't give in and allow it to, because all those mechanisms are there to get you to either repeat something or to forget again. Because in this mode, even if it's dream world mode, even if it's avatar mode, you still can either be conscious or you can be following a routine that's rooted in an imaginary future. It's one of those two. And if you're conscious, you're in your power. And I also wanted to address, in a very general way, the fear-mongering done by our peers on YouTube that happens across the levels. And pointed out as something to be mindful of. There's no need to get caught up in it, but being mindful of it. Because whatever goes on YouTube when people get upset with each other and people denounce other people, all it is the person who's doing the denouncing has fear over a particular label. And they have uncompleted issues within themselves, unconfronted issues within themselves that they are hiding from looking at by projecting anger and angst labels, name calling, denouncement. That's all that is. And there's no reason for you, if you're interested in leaving that stuff behind, there's no need for you to involve yourself in that or to give it attention or to allow yourself to be reactive, because once you come to awareness of yourself, or you're at least coming to that realization, you will notice that you always have a choice as to whether or not you react. The unconscious self is what reacts. That's it. Conscious self reacts if it wants to. If it feels like that would be beneficial in some way. If it wants to teach somebody a lesson in a way that they couldn't have understood unless that conscious being reacted in that way, but because they wanted to. Not because the basketball hit the ground and bounced up because it had no other choice to bounce up. If the basketball has no other choice than to bounce up, then it's not conscious. It's not aware. I am not interested in any of the reactive stuff. Any of the inflammatory, derogatory name-calling, labeling. I'm just not interested in it. We've already seen the division. We've seen the dichotomization of everything. We've seen the polarizing everything everywhere. That's the norm here. And when our so-called group of people fall prey to that same exact thing, it's separating who's aware and who's not in a very obvious and visual way. And it's okay. But the point is that you don't need to participate in it. I don't need to participate in it. I have no desire to. I don't see the benefit for me or for any other parties that would be involved. It's not hard to understand what it is to be a good person. You see, all of these rules and commandments are given to the unconscious. Conscious people don't need them. We don't need a 10 commandments. We don't need somebody to tell us you ought to be nice to one another. We don't need somebody to tell us you shouldn't be name calling. If somebody tells you to do it and you're only doing it because they told you to, well, then you're not being yourself anyway. You're not looking at alternatives and making a conscious, rational choice. Are you? You're not having the stillness within that allows you to look at a situation rather than react immediately. The drama just stops you. It momentarily pauses your progress, your awakening, your returning to consciousness. That's all it does. It's never a help. Or else it's titillation, or else it's fear porn. It's not ever helping anything. Because if you notice, if somebody's name calling and they're calling out whoever's watching the video to take sides, or else they're being a fence sitter, what they're actually doing is they're wanting to give more power to their position. because they're not sure about it themselves. Because if they were sure about it, they wouldn't need anybody to join them to convince themselves that that's the correct position, would they? Only fearful individuals or fearful nations or fearful any groups have to have support from other individuals in order for their ideas or their denouncements or their judgments to feel correct. If you're not fearful, you don't need any of that. It's all there already. It's not written in words. It's just in you. It's a knowing. It's a sense. You don't need commandments. You don't need a million rule playbook. You're a big boy or a big girl and you can figure it out yourself. You know, it's in you already. The reactive element is not interesting to me. People being mean is not interesting to me. It's just unconscious. How is that interesting? Because the ego thinks it knows everything. And it doesn't know anything. It's just a focus. It's a taking of all the information and it's a focus down into truth. And then it wants to push that on everybody else. That's all it is. Nothing special about it. I'll leave a link for Arcturus RA's video. I enjoy his style of delivery. And I may rewatch Westworld, even though, like I said, we can only be given the wake-up prods so many times. And you have to take responsibility for your existence at some point. Because if you don't, at some point, then it's just illustrating that there wasn't a conscious spark there to begin with, so it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. I'm only here for people who are either aware or who are pushing to remember. And everyone else who isn't. There's nothing there to work with anyway, so You can go back to the bot versus human analogy or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter.